The geese are having a fight.
Geese are chatting. The geese are chatting. Oh yeah, there's a whole, there's a trio.
Why are they talking so much though?
They love this stretch, actually. When we did a little filming over here, and there was one right below us that was just like,
where's my food?
Yeah. So right, so that sort of history, does that sort of use of this area return? What happens to power? What happens to all of this? What happens after it gets dredged? Like, what is and capped and all that? What is the future of this?
And all those big buildings.
And all the buildings that are going to go up, right? There's going to be a huge building right here. They're going to get flooded. So then what happens, right? Like, so this is the fun part of dreaming when you think of how to, and if there's a future that you think can be better, right? This is what we were talking about. Like, what things do you, like the transportation dreams, like how can those make a future along this more livable for all? They're like, we're out of here.
We live in the present.
Yeah. So this is the like on-site dreaming part and creating part. And I did bring some scratch paper and I did bring some pens. So
we have 2 sites that we've scoped out. Becky already knows that Lowe's parking lot. Many of you know the Lowe's parking lot. You may know the Lowe's parking lot. So with the difference in the Lowe's parking lot is there's less functional objects in the water, but you can get all the way into the water.
You can touch the water.
You can actually, if you really want to, you can touch the water. But it's also interesting because it's like this gesture towards remediation. So in some ways, it has some of the tools that you might use, but more as a gesture than an actual action. So there's riprap, there's gravel, there's a kind of...
there's a boat ramp.
There's a boat ramp. You can't use it, but... so that's a pretty fascinating site. So I think what we're thinking is that you can choose, but we can all go together there and then kind of scope it out, and then we'll take a moment and kind of split into groups.
Like if people are like, see who's interested in this spot and working over here, and who's interested in that spot and working over there, and that can be sort of the brainstorm groups. And you can be 2 people or 3 people or whatever works.
Right now, we're at half tide. Low tide was at 3:26 this morning. High tide was at 9:13, and low tide will be at 3:26 this afternoon. So it's also a new moon, and the moon affects the tides a foot's worth. On the canal, where almost everywhere you can see that high tide is comfortably low.
Yeah.
In 100 years, it's going to be right up there half the time.
High.
Yeah. So when all that water hits this wall, it's a sloppy inconvenience, but it's not. It's up to here. It's spreading out and making everything not work.
Like it's not dramatic. It's just a series of small steps that lead to infrastructural disaster. But, you know, like it's not, and I think that's an interesting thing to think about, and that's why we go in those incremental steps when we do the tour, because it's kind of like, well, in 2050, it's just sloppy, you know? And then in 2070, most things have broken down in their current form, but we thought of new forms, you know? So it's not like it happens with a bang. It's a long, drawn-out whimper.
Yesterday, the Lightstone project, right by the Carroll Street Bridge, the first high-rises.
Oh.
They, you know, theoretically thought about all this. They do have a below-grade parking lot there.
Okay, so what are the details of these developments? And one of the details is there's underground parking, which is hilarious, honestly. Like, you can't make this stuff up. It's perfect.
In a marsh.
Yeah.
Submarine down there.
So, you know.
Well,
yeah,
see,
exactly.
and there you go.
Like, that's what we were discussing.
So what happens to these what
So
happens.
all the personal watercraft that you all thought of, they get parked in the underground pool.
Right. And how many stories of the buildings do you just give to water? Right? Do you?
None of these buildings, I mean, are probably designed to be under or partially submerged.
Right, the materials.
Right.
When you think about something being built, do we use the same hard materials? They're already working on like wood, compressed wood as a new kind of steel.
In terms of the materials, can there be new materials? Like they're actually making building materials from mycelium that are as strong as stone. Now, they are biodegradable. So what is their lifetime? I don't think we know yet.
And they're mostly used for insulation, I think, at this point.
Yes,
right?
although people are playing with
Oh, boy.
like furniture and some
Biodegradable furniture, then you get a new one. It's awesome. Grow a new one.
Right, and so they're playing with this. So what other materials might have that kind of strength? And what's that? Bamboo.
Naturally waterproof materials.
Bamboo. There could be materials made from algae, materials made from jellyfish. What other materials could be strong, not water afraid, could work with water? I don't know. The people are testing all these things we've just mentioned: bamboo, mycelium, algae, jellyfish. Like these are in the works.
I'm gonna go say hello to our friends.
Yay! Right, so that's another fun thing to sort of dream about. Like these are actually, I read a really cool research on using jellyfish, because jellyfish in warm waters are just going to become more and more and more and more abundant. And so they're like, okay, how do we use jellyfish to be water filters? So you're using an organic material. The jellyfish naturally take up what's in the water, the materials in the water, and then the water, if we could find a way that it could be porous, then they could filter the water.
Like oysters do.
Like oysters do, yes. And it can be passed through the jellyfish. It's the future, hopefully, in a way that's actually not harming the planet, right? If there's plenty of algae, because there will be more algae, and if there's plenty of jellyfish, because there will be more jellyfish, how do we use it? Is it a natural resource that we can use?
This is another place where obviously we've tried working against the land. It's not working.
Right, right,
So we're going to have to start working with the water,
right,
not against it.
right. And with our other cohabitating species,
Right.
the ones that, like the Paulownia tree, that is going to survive.
Just keep doing what you're doing. It makes you feel like you have the power to do that and facilitate.
Think so?
Yes, but everyone's not using it.
Yeah, I'll bring my comments off. Careful, there's a...
Yes, apples, please.
Yeah, I know, this is fascinating, right? Oh, it is a kitty. Yeah. Yeah, no, this is the other site that we were like, okay, you're on the canal, you can picture what a rise would happen. If you were taking a tour along here, what would you say about the past, about the present, and steps into the future, incremental steps in the future, and how would you help people envision that, feel it? And where you see the fence end, you could get in the water if you wanted to. It's a boat ramp that's closed. But you can see that Lowe's created this buffer, right? This runoff buffer, and made it a public space. I'm actually glad the trash monster isn't working today because it's loud, but it's pretty fascinating to watch.
So, now that we know both places and some details about both places, let's do a sorting. So think about where you'd want to do a tour. So let's do this, like, if you want to do it over there, come on my right hand. If you want to do it here, come on my left hand.
And if you want to actually walk this first, I don't know if anybody has not been in this space.
Yeah, I'd like to walk around.
Yeah, so. So there's water all the way up. This was all exposed yesterday during low tide. Like these little buoy things were lying on the ground. So we don't know. It's something we'd have to ask. But let's go back to Clarinda.
So what do you know? What do you want to know? And then from what you know, what would you like to change? Or what seems like, so Carolyn, for example, what seems fun about what is here, or intriguing, or that could be evocative during, if you were taking people around on a tour? So Carolyn just remarked like, oh, we would totally do something with this weird rock pile, you know? Yeah, so like, what are the features of the landscape that are already there that could evoke something entertaining or amusing or intriguing about the future? And then, you know, from those elements, like, think about how you would adapt or reimagine the site going into the future. You can take any kind of like direction you want. You can go dystopian, you can go utopian, you can go like as realistic as possible. One of our tours, we gave those 3 choices to everybody. And we had 3 different scripts depending on what people chose. They almost all chose realist, which is really interesting. How do you stay grounded in the data that we know, right? So as far as we know, it's all this, you know, the science of the future, so we don't know necessarily. It's all projections, but the models we've made so far have been pretty good. So there are no facts, but the speculations are not highly speculative.
There are facts about what is changing, right? We talked
Yeah,
yesterday about how trees are moving. Trees that can't handle the change in temperatures, they are slowly moving up to higher climbs or dying out, right? Like, and we have species that have been introduced that are actually have more staying power than some of the species that were native to the spot. Like, there are things we know, and those sort of changes are going to continue. But in terms of predicting temperature, we've done a lot of looking at models so we can give you some more ideas. We've talked a little bit about it, like by 2100 this will be pretty tropical, subtropical, like Florida, 100 in the summers, 100 degrees, 100% humidity for days on end, right? More rains. The storms will be more extreme, the hot and cold will be more extreme. Like, these are pretty solid predictions for what's coming for our place, for where we are. And so when you think about tides, and thank you for bringing that up today, when you think about tides, when you think about sea level rise, when you think about more rainfall, when you think about all these different things, then what, if I'm looking at those tanks, what happens to them in 30 years? What happens to them in 50 years, right? Are they even still there, and what happened to what they used to do, right? So like, if you're on this site, that's sort of where you're taking in what's here, what might change, what's the ideal, some of those great dreams you all were coming up with yesterday, and what are some things that aren't ideal, but how will we have to live with them? That could be economic, it could be social, it could be cultural, whatever it is.
Take notes, draw sketches, and think about like, what are the, like I said, reimaginings and adaptations of that specific site. So that could be architectural, it could be what living things are around you, it could be what are the economic resource shifts, what are the social shifts, and you're gonna have to choose, right? We have limited time. So don't like feel like you have to do everything. You could just pick like this section or that section and choose a few things. This is a workshop at the moment. So, and then when you think about that, also think about like the props. So those of you who were at the gallery show saw some of the, hey, some of the props that we used and find a way to devise like a mini tour. Maybe we'll talk each other through a little mini tour, right? And we have, whoops.
Right now we have about an hour and a half.
We have an hour and a half. So
The question is the tour in the what's there now, or is the tour in the future?
oh, in the future.
In the future.
Yes. And do determine a time period.
Yes, so you can start with information about the past, and you can say, okay, we're here now, this is what things are now, we're going to take you to the future. And actually that's something I thought about this morning. I'm like, if you're taking someone to the future, how are you taking them there? What thing do you need to do to have people realize, oh, we've just jumped forward 20 years? We have a bunch of funny little things we've done, like little walking rituals or sounding, or they have to swim like fish through a water portal or whatever. We've had a whole bunch of things. But like that's a fun thing also to imagine. Like, how do we get people to the jump in time? And that has to do with where you're going. What's in that jump in time that you have to prepare for?
And how far in the future should we go?
As far as you want.
Oh, excellent.
You know, where we would also have vegetables and all these things to barter, and have maybe the mushrooms that we were talking about before that could be then brick, maybe have the bamboo, or like I'm adding more and more in my head. Having like all these natural elements to actually also barter with and like, you know, exchange. And have the floodland be really also kind of be the safety zone basically for the rest of the community, because here we would actually really catch a lot of the water, but it would also be the public space.
But it's interesting to me, like how, like you say, you started environmental, like how just thinking environmental immediately goes into the social and economic.
Right.
You know, like I think that's what we discover often. It's like, okay, let's do this environmental thing, but then there's all these people and other living things and systems. Like there's nothing that is not embedded in how we think about our systems. So.
And we've altered so much. So what is it to go back to something that's more natural and environmental based, right? Like, so what does that take? That also takes engineering. And that's an interesting thought too. So then that takes political and societal will and but yeah, so it's the discussion. What you guys just did is where we start every time we do one of these tours on a new waterway. And it sprawls, and we're like, oh my God, there's so much to think about. And then you're like, okay, we have an hour and it can't be longer than a mile. What do we do? Right? So then you start to pick out the things that feel the most, I don't know, exciting or tangible or important. But this is great. So now we turn to, and I'm going to record this. So now I'm going to resume. That's what I'm going to do. We turn to you two to walk us through the conversation you had about this site.
Do you want to talk first? Do you want me to talk first?
I can talk first.
Okay.
So we decided also on 2100, right? And it's kind of like it seems like a little dystopian at first, but it's kind of a utopia. Like,
That's my favorite kind.
yeah. Basically, like all like the higher class, like richer people, like just leave. And then so then the lower class people are here. And we also thought like the barges could be like just like places to grow food. So like we have food, and we thought maybe the skyline or that could be like the skyline where we also have food, just fill up the whole thing with oil.
Giant farm.
And
Because the
it-
grid's going to go down, and so the subway won't work.
And I think we didn't even decide it was going to be like a market. We just thought it was going to be like a community garden.
Yeah.
Where everyone just like kind of does their share.
Yeah.
And just takes whatever they need.
So that part is like a real economic utopia. Because you don't really have to have a job if you can get your food for free.
There's a few other things we spend money on, but I get your point.
Yeah.
Well, the idea being that like the things that we spend money on is going to change too, because these corporations aren't going to be able to keep making stuff if all the shorelines are flooded. But the notion that like these barges are both farms, urban farms, but also there's a desalination thing because the water table is going to destroy the upstate water. So we're going to have no clean drinking water. So we're going to have to somehow figure out how to drink this water.
That's such a good visceral. That's a good visceral.
And so, like, we were envisioning like a really complex desalination invention that someone's going to come up with, I guess, to be able to drink this water. And
that's it, right?
That looks like it. And then with all the rich people sort of moving up, because the rich people are just going to move out because it's going to become not, luxurious enough.
Desirable.
They're not gonna have their gym in the basement anymore because the basement's gonna be underwater. So we decided that the rich people are just gonna move upstate or up island, up,
higher ground.
Yeah, they're gonna go to higher ground because that's what this whole place started. Because it was the water table of Brooklyn. It was the sinkhole of Brooklyn, and all the water from the entire borough flowed here. So what's going to happen is it's going to flood more and more often until I'm imagining it would eventually reclaim the old watershed area.
So yeah, we thought the poor people would adapt, and like the rich people would just be kind of running from whatever's happening, and they're just gonna keep going higher up until eventually there is no more up.
Or up.
And I was just thinking that the poor people, or like the people that stayed back, might have a better chance at like making it further. Just like, I don't know, as long as they can make it more than the rich people, because they're not adapting.
There's really nothing here unless all this stuff is working. Communal parenting, all this stuff. Like, poor people are so great at what can go. So they have to. So maybe if the city gets funneled, like all the people that are not good at working together are funneled out of it, the city gets friendlier.
So, people in general that actually come up with a system out of necessity, right? Because they're here. They make this a better place. And what happens then? Like what always happens is like the rich people come in, right? And that's what needs to stop, right? That's where we have to find the solution already ahead of time. How can we make that not be the case?
How can we beat the corporation?